You're watching The Bridge, sponsored by Novum, providing solutions for a new generation. In today's world, it's never been more important for the government agencies and the businesses that serve them to find new solutions to the many issues facing our country. The Bridge is the only television program devoted exclusively to bridging the gap between today's government and the private business sector. Welcome to The Bridge.
Hello, I'm Jim McCarthy. I'm the host of The Bridge. Each week, we explore how to bridge the gap between today's government and the private sector. Later in this show, I'm going to sit down with Wagish, Bhartiya, the Senior Director of Government Cloud Solutions at REI Systems. Wagish and I will discuss potential gaps between the public sector's performance management and where it needs to be. First, we're going to focus on another critical gap, however, and that gap is between the future of automation and the modernization in the government's IT development and the factors that may be holding this back. We have two very experienced leaders in this arena who are going to join us today. First, I'd like to welcome Dave Mihelcic, the Federal Chief Technology and Strategy Officer at Juniper Networks, and a 30-year public sector veteran before joining Juniper Federal's division. Dave was also CTO at DISA, where he implemented an enterprise-wide engineering process for the Department of Defense. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here, man. Glad you're here. Next, we have Davey Ahearn. We have the Dave and the Davies here today. Davey is the CEO and founding partner of BluestoneLogic, and Dave brings 20 years of experience working with the DoD, building command and control and operation planning systems for the military. Good morning to you, Davey.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
So let me start with you, David. The first question I would ask is, what are some strategies that the government and the private sector ought to use in order to modernize legacy systems in a time of constrained budgets?
I think well, it's a great question, first of all. I think in the current IT environment, we're looking at these legacy systems, and those legacy systems are based on old technology, but it's old government developed technology. I think the government needs to look more toward the commercial sector to see what they've done and implement their actual solutions in a way that works for them, but to share the burden of sustaining these systems with industry rather than taking on the entire burden themselves as the government.
See what is proven and tested in the private sector before importing it, so to speak.
That's right.
Okay, Dave Mihelcic, what would be your view from your perspective?
So absolutely, I agree with that. I think a couple of points of focus need to be to construct systems in a modular fashion, and that way we can integrate best-of-breed commercial technologies, open source technologies, and in certain instances, government unique technologies.
Okay, that sounds like a good strategy. While I'm on the subject, you were the chief, technology officer for DISA, correct?
Yes.
And so a question I guess I would ask is, what is the innovation landscape look like for DoD and the intelligence community nowadays? What's happening, in other words, in the world here?
So I think the bottom line is it's getting better every day. If you look at efforts that the intelligence community started more than 10 years ago in terms of InQtel, they partnered with venture capitalists to bring innovative companies into their space. The DoD has started up things like the DIUX, the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, which uses another transaction authority to do prototype system development. We have other things going on in the department. One I'd really like to highlight is at SOCOM. They have something called SoftWorks, where instead of doing the innovation themselves, they've contracted with a 501c3, a not-for-profit corporation called the Doolittle Institute, and that allows them to better interact with universities and other non-traditional partners. So I think there's a lot of good stuff going on, and I think the key is how do we take the results of those efforts and operationalize them and support them in the long term.
Yeah, Davey, your company does a lot of work with the Department of Defense and intelligence community. What's the landscape look from your perspective, from your perch atop this very prestigious company?
Well, to me, I agree with what Dave's mentioned about looking to non-traditional sources for technology. I think the acquisition processes that are in place restrict that a bit, but I see that changing. I see that other transaction authorities using non-traditional suppliers of technology in a much quicker contractual way, but also touching on Dave's previous comment about modularity. I think seeing what's being developed in the commercial sector and in the open source sector, and commercial companies now supporting open source,
Right.
and making sure it's locked down in such in a way that can be used
Right.
for government purposes. The OTA and non-traditional companies can now play a bigger role.
Got it. All right. So this, we're here to talk about the future of automation. So let me ask you, basically, what is the future of automation? What do you guys think about that from where we are today to, let's say, 10 years out or something? What's the future look like?
So I think there's a lot of room for progress. Today, system administrators, whether they be computer or network administrators, execute many tasks by hand, repetitively. So over time, we're going to take those repetitive tasks and we're going to script those. We're going to push them out to network and compute elements so they can done reliably without errors. And then over time, we're going to move from this just scripting of rote activities to event-driven automation, where we'll have systems that can look at what's going on in the network, in the computer operating system, respond to changes. So a network failure, perhaps an attack from a cyber adversary, and react to that in real time.
Do you think we'll be able to stay ahead of the bad guys?
So absolutely, we are staying ahead of the bad guys today, but you have to be prepared for someone penetrating your network. So you can't count purely on defense. You got to have response forces. And this is an area where DoD has had a lot of focus through United States Cyber Command, standing up platoons of cyber warriors who not only defend the network, but they also respond when an adversary does penetrate the network.
Okay, I see. Well, Davey, when we were talking, you mentioned that your company does, quote, some really cool things from your, I think you called it a Wonka factory on McPherson Square.
That's right.
So I'd like to actually break for commercial now, but when we come back, I'd like to hear a little bit about what are those really cool things that you all are doing that, that you can talk about in the open public domain. Okay?
Looking forward to it.
We will be right back.
Hello, I'm Craig Underhill. For 16 years, we have partnered with the government contracting community. We understand the unique needs and opportunities of this critical industry.
We recognize the uncertainties in today's political and economic climate, and we are here to help. We provide customized products and solutions to GovCon clients throughout the country.
We are the Freedom Bank of Virginia, the GovCon Bank. Let's talk.
As you can see, we've begun to produce and air impactful business messages, and I'd like you to hear from two of our strategic partners.
Freedom Bank is a full-service bank specializing in meeting the goals of the government contracting community. The Bridge provides us with the perfect platform to engage with current and potential customers. That's why, as the GovCon Bank, we have chosen the Bridge to deliver our message nationwide to you.
At the Bridge, we include full commercial production, and we deliver a large and totally targeted audience with virtually no waste.
At Kroll and Mooring, we take a lot of pride in having a large and diverse government contracts law practice. We are lawyers and strategic advisors to contractors in every aspect of the government contracting marketplace. That is why Kroll and Mooring is pleased to partner with the Bridge.
Dollar for dollar, there may simply be no smarter way to reach your target market. If you'd like to learn more, go to thebridgeontv.com and click on Advertise.
Welcome back to The Bridge. I'm Jim McCarthy. Before the commercial break, I had asked Davey Ahearn from BluestoneLogic, what are some of the cool things that you're doing in your shop nowadays? Yeah.
I mean, it really touches on what David mentioned before with automation. We are an analysis, engineering, and design shop, and we're focused on how to make software better for people. In the end, people are using this stuff, and they need to use it to make their jobs and their lives better. And so we're focused on the breadth of design and engineering to make that happen. We do that through a number of ways. We'll work with virtual reality, Oculus Rift development platforms. We've looked at ways that military software can be implemented in those scenarios. We also look at automated business process automation. Like David said, I think automation is really going to be about removing the risk of mistakes from humans' actions in their jobs. And so we automate business processes through business process engines and things like that, and then make it easy to use on the glass for the users who do it.
Okay. then with that, from time to time, members of our audience, they send in questions and comments. And so we have a video, a very brief video, that a question is going to be posed to both of you. And so I'd like to run the videotape now, Anna, if you don't mind, and then we'll get your response to it. Okay.
How advanced technologies like blockchain could be utilized by both civilian and DoD agencies to better improve security of IT infrastructure.
Okay, so Davey, what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, I look at blockchain as a sort of foundational technology. It's obviously not ready for use today, but could play a large role in the future. When I hear about blockchain, and I think about the ability to bring in open source technology or open source messages into what's typically military-only networks. Like, you could look at Facebook for intelligence. You could look at Twitter for location reports and things like that. In the past, command and control systems where we work have been real focused on military-controlled sensors. I think those sensors now, we're walking around with them in our hand, and the blockchain technology will allow us to trust or not trust the data we get from other people's sensors and how we use it in the military and intel community.
Okay, Dave Mihelcic, what's your take on blockchain?
So blockchain is very interesting technology. Unfortunately, right now, the biggest implementation people are aware of is Bitcoin, which may or may not turn out to be the next big financial mechanism. It might turn out to be a pyramid scheme. But I think blockchain, the inherent technology, can give us a lot of advantages in being able to securely authenticate commands across the network and take those automations that we're starting to develop and ensure that they're bulletproof, that an adversary can't use our automations against us.
Against us, okay. Question for both of you. Basically, we're talking about the future of automation. So the question is, how can IT be made to be more agile, more efficient, more dynamic, more virtualized, more secure? All those things at once are legitimate goals for what we're trying to do. How do we do that? How's that done?
So I always like to start with open standards. So you may buy equipments and technologies from proprietary vendors, but you want to have interfaces that are open so that you can program against those. There are technologies that exist today that standard open source toolkits that allow you to do that. Ansible is one of them, SaltStack is another, Puppet and Chef. Leverage these technologies and leverage products that allow you to use these technologies and program those products directly.
Davey?
And I'd add on to that by mentioning open source code and open source technology. I think many people don't realize that software is essentially literature. It's written in a language that's not the language we speak, but it's readable. And when open source technology has a readable language, it can be secured at its lowest level.
Well, I was going to say, aren't there some concerns amongst some of the technical professionals about open source could present some security risks?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think that the security risks that people look to are about not understanding what's in the code, but if code is open, it can be read, so it can be understood.
So do you mind if I answer that?
No, I would love to hear.
I think there's a lot of misperceptions about open source. People think open source is a bunch of kids sitting in their rec rooms building the software that runs the internet. That isn't the way it's done. Major corporations make huge investments of their time and their programmers to partner together on open source programs. Red Hat Linux is one of the most widely used operating systems in the Department of Defense. It's open source, but the DoD contracts with Red Hat to provide configuration management of the build and secure support of the environment.
I see. Okay.
That's why we say we always work with open source but commercially supported technologies.
Right.
The commercial support is critical to being able to have the safety that Dave mentions in its use.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay, well, we're going to step away for another commercial. When we come back, I want to sort of get your final thoughts on a couple points, okay? So we'll be right back once again.
Every day, there is an organization in crisis. Critical decisions must be made. Action must be taken. Communications must occur. Where do you turn? Transform your crisis into value with Firestorm, America's crisis coach. Predict, plan, perform. To learn more about crisis planning and critical decision support for your organization, visit firestorm.com.
Today's program is brought to you by the international law firm Kroll & Mooring, LLP, whose lawyers help leading corporations navigate Washington. Kroll & Mooring offers a premier government contracts practice with 40 years of experience to serve clients from startups to Fortune 50 companies.
Okay, we're back now. We're here with Dave Mihelcic and also for Davey Ahearn. And so we're going to get into some final thoughts and closing in just a moment. Before we do that, give me your thoughts, gentlemen, about what agencies and the private sector can do to stretch their IT budget nowadays. Go ahead, Dave, and start.
So there's a few things. First of all, using open competitions as opposed to sole source awards. If you take your RFPs and you cast them in terms of open source requirements that multiple vendors can meet, you're going to get best dollar value from the bids those vendors provide. So avoid sole source solicitations, always go for full and open competition. A second thing that you might take a look at is, once again, automation. What are those tasks you can do immediately in terms of scripting rote activities to be able to reduce your personnel spend, and then you can reinvest that personnel spend in upgrading your network.
Davey Ahearn, if you were trying to stretch your IT dollar and deliver more for less, how would you approach it?
Well, first is we would model cost against capability and look for opportunities to get high capability for lower costs. A lot of times, like we mentioned before, that involves open source but commercially supported technologies. But I also think it involves differentiating between vendors who provide commercial technologies and integrators who provide labor to integrate those technologies. The more you bring commercial technologies into the play, the less integration you will need. So I think you can spend most of your budget on creating enterprise user license agreements for large commercial products, and then giving your program managers and chief engineers more choice and reducing the need for them to lean on integrators.
Would one way to say it be to put more emphasis on plug and play and the interchangeability and dynamics of it?
Yeah, that's part of the modular strategy Dave mentioned earlier, I think.
Okay. Dave Mihelcic, just a couple weeks ago, I believe, the Federal Times, you had an opinion piece that you wrote where you called for more cloud orchestration. We have about a minute remaining. I was wondering if you could just sort of tell us what cloud orchestration is and why you're calling for it.
So the federal government has made a lot of progress in starting to leverage commercial cloud solutions, but one of the things I've noticed is that they're still using legacy techniques for management and deployment of solutions into those clouds. So through adopting orchestration solutions, they can automate the deployment and management of solutions into commercial clouds and potentially even automate those across multiple cloud vendors. And once again, that'll not only lead to reduced costs, but higher reliability and potentially higher cybersecurity as well.
Okay, thank you. We have a little limited time. Let's quick to get your final thought, Davey.
Software and technology should not be confusing. If you're hearing from vendors and they're confusing you, you need to talk to other vendors.
You got the wrong vendors.
Yeah,
huh?
that's right.
Okay, how about Dave, your final thought?
Open standards, automate, 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 and cybersecurity.
Okay, got it. Okay, well listen, time just flew by. I want to thank our guests today, Davey Ahearn and Dave Mihelcic. Thank you both for joining us. And when we come back, I'll be joined by Wagish Bhartiya to discuss performance management. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Greg McCarthy, CEO of AOC Key Solutions, a consulting firm that has helped companies win more than $150 billion in federal contracts. We provide capture and proposal expertise to help you produce compliant, compelling proposals that score higher with evaluators. Let us help you develop a winning proposal so you can focus on what you do best, supporting your government customer. Visit us at aockeysolutions.com to learn more.
They do so much for us. That's why we do so much for them. USO Metro's programs boost the morale of our military members and their families. Located right here in the Washington-Baltimore region are the largest USO centers in the world. The USO Warrior and Family Centers at Fort Belvoir and Bethesda. These state-of-the-art centers provide services to lift the spirits of our troops and their families and offer robust programs for the wounded, ill, and their caregivers. USO Metro Centers and airport lounges provide a strong sense of community, familiarity, and trust by providing a home away from home. USO Metro is proud to serve those who serve and their families. In Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. I'm joined by Wagish Bhartiya. Wagish is the Senior Director of Government Cloud Solutions at REI Systems. And before that, he honed his skills at such companies as Amazon and Living Social, where he led sales and marketing strategy development. Welcome, Wagish. Let me ask you a two-part question. Sure. First of all, define for our audience what you mean by performance management and analytics. And then the second thing is, why should our audience care? Why is it important to them?
Sure. Okay. So let's start with data analytics. Okay. I think folks are much more familiar with data analytics. It's the notion of using data, reporting on it, visualizing it to extract meaning. Performance management is the next step or the evolution from data analytics in the form of using evidence to make better policy and to inform decision making. Okay. I think folks both in government and in the contracting world should care for three reasons. The first is right now, the broader group of citizens are asking for more from their government than ever before, but the resources aren't following suit. So that's one. The second is, as Pew Research suggests, the trust level in government is at an all-time low. 1 in 5 Americans actually trust that government will do the right thing. So that's the second. The third is the current political and economic climate. Program funding and program budgets are being decided with a hatchet, not with a scalpel. So it's all or nothing, not in between. Right. For all three reasons, performance management rises to the top.
And it seems like you can't very well manage what you can't measure, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
that's the principle.
All right. Okay, so in the area of performance management, talk about some of the gaps, as we use the term here on the show, or the challenges associated with this whole field of endeavor.
Sure. I think there are two principal gaps when it comes to performance management. The first is cultural. Government inherently is very large and very complex. There's also a disincentive to be entirely transparent because of the asymmetry that exists between risk and reward. That puts downward pressure on bringing to surface outcomes, right? That's one. The second is data itself. The data is hard to capture and oftentimes is of poor quality.
Okay, so that there is a trade-off though associated with that. So let me ask you, given some notable events like Equifax and OPM and Sony, why isn't performance management sort of on the sideline and just a distraction? Isn't it more important to secure the very essence of the networks and so on?
The choice to invest in performance management does not preclude investments in cybersecurity, which are absolutely critical. But it's sort of like your car may get a flat tire, you need to replace it. But you need to keep putting oil in your engine to keep it running smoothly for the long term.
You can't ignore one in favor of the other, totally. Okay. All right, so I use a phrase often in the show called a toolbox, and I'm just asking, what are some of the tools that you, essentially utilize or recommend in this whole area of performance management and analytics?
I think there's a wide set of tools that can be used. I think from a framework perspective, I would offer this. A 4-step process. Start with describing what matters to your agency, to your program. Define the outcomes, right? Then collect them. Go out and collect that data so you actually have it to analyze, which is the third step. Fourth, then you have to react and learn from it and then repeat the cycle again.
Okay, so a continuous kind of loop.
Absolutely. So
constant learning.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the elements of the toolbox. What else?
I think in addition to that is knowing that data is multitudinous. And as such, use visualization to help identify outliers as opposed to the commonality. Manage by exception as opposed to by rule. Right. That'll help identify some of the things that need to be either exploited because they were really working or need to be addressed because they're a big risk to the government.
Right. It's almost like data, the multitudinous, as you call it. It's actually more, it's even worse than that. It's pervasive, is it not? I mean, how can anyone live it or even find their way through it?
Absolutely.
So this is part of the way to do that.
I mean, the collection of data, I think it's a stepwise function. Don't try to say, big bang, let's do everything at once. Say, let's start small. Let's identify the 2 or 3 data sets that matter to us because they're linked to mission. They're linked to outcomes for the American public. Say, what are we actually doing with that? are the efforts we're putting in tied to outcomes or not, and move forward from there. It doesn't have to go, full hog.
And without sort of a lessons learned or corrective actions, it sort of becomes a closed loop. What we want to do is continually review it and learn from it and advance the state of the art, so to speak, right? Okay. So you're working to essentially to redefine what government solutions look like by embedding this performance management and data into the government solutions. How are you doing that?
So I think there's a couple different pieces, right? So up front, when we kick off a project, we reframe the conversation about outcomes, about performance, about what they want the system to deliver when it comes to IT, not about technology, not about capability, not about functionality, not about that. Okay. Secondly, we say, hey, how do we create alignment between the folks that are executing a program, a government program, and the leadership? This is where the data and the metrics really come in. So everyone's marching in the same direction. Okay. And then third, when it comes to the actual output, say, hey, what are we doing to deliver better health, better education, better defense? And say that is now going to be tangible, transparent to the broader American public.
I got it. Okay. All right. Well, we have about a little over 30 seconds left, and at this point in the show, I normally ask our guests for any kind of final thoughts or takeaways that you would like to leave the audience with today. So tell us what you think.
Sure. Well, Jim, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the future of government will not look like the current government. Today's government is largely focused on compliance and oversight. Tomorrow's government will be fundamentally different.
How so?
It'll be focused on results and insight. Performance management is the bridge, much like your show, between the current and the future. And my ask is that everyone sort of take a step onto it and see what happens, right? Just take a first step and move towards that future state.
Very well, very good. Well, I know that you really understand your field and you're one of the recognized experts, and so we really thank you for being here today. I really want to thank you for joining us on The Bridge. It was a great perspective, frankly, so thanks a lot. Now to you, our audience, please visit us online at thebridgeontv.com, and there you can stream all of our episodes, share comments and suggestions. You can even ask questions, and you can see the latest update of our very own Bridge Gap Index. Finally, most importantly, thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to watch The Bridge. We'll see you next week right here and on thebridgeontv.com. Now, on behalf of my colleagues, I'm Jim McCarthy.
Watching The Bridge, sponsored each week by Novum, providing solutions to a new generation. The Bridge is the only television program devoted exclusively to bridging the gap between today's government and the private business sector. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at thebridgeontv.com.